If you were raised by a black Gen X parent, one sound still does something to your spine. Keys jingling in the front door at exactly 6 o'clock, and your whole body knew what that meant. Maybe it's the smell of grease popping in the kitchen before you even got your shoes off, or that particular silence that fell over a room when your mother's eyes moved slowly from the television to you. That silence carried more weight than any lecture, and somehow, decades later, you can still feel it settle in your chest. There was another sound, too, the creak of a bedroom door at 11 at night. Your father checking to make sure you were actually asleep and not just pretending. Something about that quiet act of checking told you more about love than any hug ever did. Maybe it was the porch lights staying on long after everyone else said they were tired and ready for bed. A small, stubborn glow, meaning somebody was still awake, still watching, still holding the whole house together in the dark. Today, we're going somewhere tender, into the inner world of the parents who raised so many of us, the ones who came up in the 70s and 80s, who inherited a certain toughness from their own parents. They passed down to us a strange, complicated mix of fierce protection and quiet emotional distance. We're going to talk about the discipline, the silence, the sacrifice, and the love that never quite said its own name. Somewhere in this, you'll probably remember a specific look, a specific phrase, maybe even a specific whipping. I want you to sit with that, because there's more tenderness underneath it than we usually give it credit for. Before we get too far in, think about where you grew up and what decade shaped your childhood. Think about the very first memory that comes rushing back when you hear hidden psychology of black parents. Hold on to that memory, because we're about to walk right into the middle of it. The belt hanging on the back of a bedroom door wasn't just an object in these households. It was a kind of unspoken contract, a boundary drawn in leather everybody understood without a word. You'd hear the buckle before you ever saw it, a metallic clink traveling through drywall faster than any voice. Your whole body would go still, waiting to see if it was for you. There was a particular smell in those houses, too. Pine sol on the linoleum, bacon grease saved in a coffee can. The discipline wasn't gentle, and looking back now, it wasn't really about the specific thing you did. It was about a parent who had grown up scared, trying to scare the world's dangers out of you first. That's the part nobody explained to you as a kid, the part that only makes sense now. Your mother wasn't just angry when she popped you for talking back in the grocery store. She was terrified because she'd seen what happened to black children who talked back at the wrong time. She would rather you fear her hand than fear a world that wouldn't think twice about you. That fear dressed itself up as strictness, as "don't you roll your eyes at me," as "I brought you in this world and I'll take you right back out." Somehow, that dark humor became its own strange comfort, repeated across so many households like folklore. Underneath all of it was a love so deep it didn't know how to speak. Chores were another language entirely in that house, one spoken without a single word of affection. You were handed a broom before you were handed a compliment, and there was a reason for that. Your parents needed you to survive, needed you capable, needed you never caught helpless in a doubting world. Act like you got some sense wasn't cruelty, even though it felt that way in the moment.
It was a mother trying to armor you against every teacher, every officer, every future boss. And somehow, in the middle of all that armor building, there were still soft Saturday mornings. The record player going, your father humming along to something soulful while he changed the oil. For just a moment, out there in the driveway, he looked like a boy himself. There was also a particular pride your parents took in a clean house, and it wasn't about vanity, it was dignity, a way of saying to the world, we take care of what we have. Plastic covers on the good couch, a china cabinet nobody was allowed to touch, a living room reserved almost entirely for company you'd never even met, kept spotless and untouched just in case they came by. All of it felt confusing as a child, but it was really a kind of quiet self-respect. You learned to make your bed with hospital corners before you learned long division. That lesson about order stuck with you longer than most of what you learned in school. It taught you that even in a world that didn't respect you, you could still hold your space together. Nobody explained why company got the good towels, while you got the ones with frayed edges and faded colors. Somehow you understood it wasn't really about you at all. It was about a certain face your parents needed to show the world. That image of your father humming in the driveway always brings me back to church. Sunday mornings had their own particular choreography in these households, starting the night before. Hair getting pressed, Sunday clothes laid out like a uniform for some kind of battle. The whole house would smell like bacon and biscuits before anybody said a word. There was always a rush, an urgency, because being late to church wasn't really an option, not with your grandmother already in the car, blowing the horn like she was late for heaven. Church wasn't just about God for a lot of these families. It was about community. It was about being seen, about a few hours where everybody dressed their best. Sitting in those hard wooden pews, fanning yourself with a paper fan from the funeral home, you learned things about your parents that home never taught you. Even those funeral home fans carried a bit of history, a black Jesus printed on cardboard, the name of the local mortuary printed quietly on the back, a small reminder of black life continuing. You'd fall asleep against your grandmother's soft shoulder halfway through that long 2-hour service, the smell of her perfume mixing with the low hum of the choir around you. You'd wake up just in time for the offering plate to pass down your row. Those Sundays taught you rhythm before anybody taught you music theory in a classroom. They taught you patience, and more than anything, they taught you a sense of belonging. Even the ride home afterward had its own quiet ritual. Windows cracked, gospel still playing low on the radio. Everybody a little looser than they'd been walking in that morning. But church wasn't the only place that held those hidden feelings your parents never said out loud. Somehow, the whole neighborhood operated the same way. Everybody's business open except for the things that hurt. You could tell your neighbor about a bad grade, a fight at school, a broken toy. Nobody talked about sadness the way we talk about it now, out loud and by name. Nobody said depression or anxiety in a house too busy surviving to name what it felt. Your mother might disappear into her bedroom for an entire Saturday afternoon, door closed, television low. You learned not to ask questions because grown folks' pain wasn't a child's business in that house. Looking back, that silence wasn't coldness. It was a generation never given permission to fall apart.
I still remember one afternoon when I was maybe 9 years old, sitting on the front steps. I watched my mother stare out the kitchen window for what felt like 20 minutes. I asked her what was wrong, blunt and unafraid, the way kids tend to be. She just said, "Nothing, baby. Go finish your homework," in a voice that didn't match her face. It wasn't until years later, going through old letters after she passed, that I understood. She'd lost her own mother that same week, decades before I was even born. Every single year around that same time, something quiet in her would just go still. She never told us, and she never asked for comfort from anyone else in that house. She carried it alone, the way so many of them carried everything, silently and without complaint. That taught me something I didn't have words for at the time. Strength isn't the absence of pain, it's just pain that learned to keep working anyway. And maybe that's why so many of our parents were fierce about being twice as good. A phrase repeated so often in kitchens and car rides, it became almost like scripture. You'd bring home a 92 on a test, and the conversation would land on the missing points. Looking back with older eyes, you understand your parents weren't chasing perfection for its own sake. They were building a shield so thick, nobody could ever question whether you belonged. Code switching became second nature, too. A phone voice appearing the moment a teacher called, a different voice than the one used 5 minutes earlier joking with a cousin nearby. You learned to move between two worlds before you even had a name for it. Your parents taught you that skill, not from shame, but from knowing how the world listened. That fierce protectiveness showed up in smaller, funnier ways, too. Memories that make you laugh even now. Your mother sizing up every friend who came through that front door with a single glance, deciding within seconds whether that child was good people or somebody you wouldn't be seeing again. Your father standing on the porch with his arms crossed, saying absolutely nothing at all, just watching whoever dropped you off, making sure they understood he was paying attention. There was a comedy to it, an exaggerated seriousness that felt embarrassing to you as a kid. As adults, we recognize it now as one more form of that same quiet vigilance. Underneath the strict rules about curfews and who you could be friends with, there was fear. A quiet, constant fear about losing you to something out there they couldn't fix themselves. Even something as small as a family cookout carried its own hidden layer of meaning. Ribs on the grill, extension cords running out to somebody's boombox in the yard, your uncles arguing about football and dominoes with a volume that sounded like anger to strangers. It was really just affection dressed up loud, comfort in speaking freely without careful softness. Your mother and her sisters would disappear into the kitchen for hours at a time, laughter drifting out through the screen door along with greens simmering on the stove. Something about that laughter between sisters felt like its own particular kind of medicine. Nobody had to say the word community out loud because you were living right inside it. And when the streetlights came on, that was the real signal. No clock needed. Every child on the block scattering home at the exact same invisible cue. That fear and the sacrifice it demanded is maybe the deepest layer underneath all that toughness. So many of them worked themselves down to the bone without ever complaining out loud. 2 jobs, sometimes 3. A mother who left the house before the sun came up. A father who picked up every overtime shift he could so there'd be new sneakers by September. You didn't always see the exhaustion because they hid it so well from you and everyone else, saving it for after you went to bed when the whole house got quiet. Nobody ever once sat you down and said plainly, "I am sacrificing everything for you."
That wasn't how love got spoken in that house, not in words at least. It got spoken quietly in electric bills paid on time and Christmas mornings with a little more than expected. It got spoken in a layaway ticket quietly paid off in October, so nobody ever had to know how close it came to not happening at all. There's a particular grief in realizing as an adult how much your parents were carrying. It usually hits hardest around the holidays when a smell in somebody's kitchen stops you cold. Maybe it's sweet potato pie, cinnamon and nutmeg thick in the air around you. Or the specific crackle of a record spinning something by the Stylistics or the Isley Brothers. Those moments were rare pockets of unguarded joy in households that mostly ran on duty. Somehow that rarity made them feel even more sacred, even more worth holding on to now. You watched your parents laugh in a way they rarely did anywhere else. For a few hours, the armor came off, and you saw who they might have been. I still remember one afternoon, years later, sitting with my father on his back porch. My own children had gone down for a nap, and we sat there, quiet, together. He told me, almost out of nowhere, that his own father never once said he loved him. Not one single time in his entire life growing up. Not once, not even close to it. He'd made a promise to himself that he'd say it to me, even if it felt foreign. Every gruff hug, every quiet, "you good?" instead of "I love you" was his own private, careful translation. Every silent ride to school with the radio turned down low, said in his own language. Getting older has a strange, patient way of turning old anger slowly into a kind of understanding over time. Why was he so hard on me became he did the best he knew how. Sitting there with him, watching the sun go down over that same porch, something in me settled. I felt something like forgiveness settle in me, mixed with a strange, aching kind of pride. That's the thing about this hidden psychology. Underneath the belts and the silences and the shifts, it was never really about control. It was about protecting children from an unkind world. They didn't always have the language for therapy, for boundaries, for emotional vocabulary, but they had something stubborn and unbreakable, a willingness to keep showing up daily, even when nobody around them ever once thought to say thank you for any of it. Somewhere between the strictness and the softness, between the silence and the sacrifice, they built something. Something in us that still holds us up now, long after we understood the cost. There's a particular tenderness, too, in remembering the small rituals your parents kept just for themselves. Your mother humming along to a slow song while ironing on a Friday night, eyes closed, swaying just slightly, lost somewhere private you weren't quite invited to follow. Your father sitting alone in his car in the driveway a few extra minutes after work, engine off, just sitting there breathing before he ever walked through that front door again. Those private moments were the parts of them that existed outside of parenting entirely, parts that had dreams and heartbreaks and friendships long before you ever came along. It takes growing up to understand how much of themselves they folded away for you. Somewhere in there, quietly and without complaint, they were still becoming themselves too, even while spending every spare hour helping you become who you were meant to be. If you made it this far, some part of you has been sitting with your own parents, hearing their voice in certain lines, maybe feeling a lump rise in your throat unexpectedly. These memories don't ever really leave us, they just wait patiently for the right cue, the right smell, the right song, the right creak of a floorboard late at night. I'd love to hear about the specific things that quietly shaped you growing up in your own house. Whatever traditions or sayings or Sunday rituals still live somewhere quietly in your bones. These stories are always richer when they're shared out loud instead of carried alone. Some future memories we walk through together might come straight from what you share below. If this stirred something in you, stick around for the next one of these, because there's another conversation waiting just around the corner, and it's going to feel like home too.